a data scientist at Dataiku. And it's a French startup, already started in 2013. Now it's an American. And we have our head office in New York, lots of other offices in Paris, of course, London, Singapore, Sydney, Munich, and Netherlands, and soon maybe other locations as well. I think today you will have loads of presentations that are very, very tech heavy. So this is why I deliberately prepared the presentation to talk about something that may have been neglected in the field of data science. Which is basically our stakeholders who are not coming from mathematics or statistics background and who do not belong to this world. And because we collaborate with them all the time, we're all one team who basically try to achieve success for the entire company. So often we think that if we do our job, if we just get a project done, if we build a very nice model, that's it, and that's all what we need to do. So this is why I deliberately made the presentation today about that side of our business. So this is why I'm going to start with this sentence, which I personally love. If you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it yourself. I'm not 100% sure that actually Albert Einstein said that, because there is doubts. However, it's strongly attributed to him that he said that. Personally, I'm very inclined to believe that he said something like this, or either the exact words or in the same meaning. The reason for this is I have never encountered anyone who is knowledgeable enough, and I found it difficult for this person to explain something complex for me. And I've always been fascinated with those people who can simplify complex things and very heavy, techy terminologies and concepts, and they simplify it very well. You will often meet people like this who use words like, okay, imagine that you're baking a cake, or imagine that you're going to the supermarket with a list of items that you're going to buy. Or something like, okay, when you play a piano, so there's always an element of relevance. They're always trying to make it relevant for you, and they're always try to extract the pure concept of what they're trying to explain to you and make it very easy for you to understand. I like those people a lot, and I would like to be one of them. Not because they're smart, but because mostly they care about others and they want to help them. And they want to make people feel good about themselves. There's nothing worse in the world than to make someone else feel that they're not smart enough or they're not qualified enough. So when I searched a lot about what's very special about those people, I did lots of readings and I watched TED Talks, and there is always one thing that it always comes back to, which is communication. And from this slide, you can see that if you literally Google the definition of communication, it's, as you can see from the screen, it's the process of passing information from one person to the other person. But maybe you can pass the information and the other person doesn't get what you're saying or doesn't understand what you're trying to communicate. So there's an element here that is missing, which is basically the communication being effective, okay? So you might be communicating something simple like your ideas or maybe your opinions, or maybe something even more solid like facts that a project is relying heavily on. Or maybe you're simply just communicating values. But as I said, this is just communication. You're just passing the information. But you're missing the element of being this communication being effective. And if you Google the definition of effective communication, that's entirely different. Effective communication means you have delivered the message successfully, it has been received successfully, and it has also been understood successfully. That needs to happen in order to have effective communication. Okay, so I Googled again, and I did some research about what makes communication effective. And you will always find things like you need to understand the need for that type of communication. You need to work on your body language, and you need to understand or to learn how to understand body language of other people who are attending your meeting. And also people would like to tell you things like, oh, you need to learn how to listen. But no one, or very, very rare, that people are asking you to know your audience. And in this context, I'm not referring to knowing your audience as who they are, where they're from, or what their educational background, or if they know mathematics or statistics, where have they been working before. I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about something very personal that we are all experiencing, which is basically the learning style. The learning style is how you perceive the information, how you digest and absorb the information, and how you comprehend it, and also how you retrieve it later. So if you remember from schools, from the days of when we were all studying and we were children, some of us like to watch videos and cartoons. Some of us like to read books. Some of us like to listen to stories. And some of us like to actually draw. So these are our learning styles. And there are ways to identify the learning style of your own self as well as for other people. Because it's important to help people to make decisions. If you look at a simple process of making any decision or taking any action, it starts with you having a problem or a business question, and then you start gathering information. And later, based on those information, you start weighing options, and after you weigh your options, you take the action or make the decision. So that means we're still relying heavily on information. And in this room, we are the people who handle information. We are the people who work with data. We are the people who process data, extract information or useful insights from it. We are the people who graph it and visualize it. And we are also the people who go back to the decision makers and the stakeholders and tell them, this is what your data is telling you. So it's very important for you to know how to communicate this and not rely on the fact that whatever you're going to say, they will understand it, because they won't. In many cases, they won't. From this, from all of what I've said, I might just say something personal about myself, because I believe that I'm the best person to give you, what would I say, an insight from this side of the business. The reason for this is I have not been a data scientist for too long. I started in different corporates. Like I have been working for a financial institution for, I think, 9 years before joining Dataiku. And before that, it was a manufacturing company back there in Egypt. That's where I come from. And also an airline. And I was always in the corporate world, and I was always reporting to someone very senior in the organization. I was always like following up on actions on their behalf. And the majority of the time, I didn't understand what I was following up on. So I would go to the people and say, this action item is on you, where are you? Or what have you done? Or what is the progress? And they would say things that I really don't understand, and I would struggle to just understand. And I can't just go back to my boss and say, well, they said it's going to be delayed for 2 months because he said something about data integration, said something about model not working. I really don't understand. So I couldn't go back to my boss saying things like that. So I had to ask questions like, can you explain this to me? And I really struggled to find someone how would I put this? Like someone kind enough to actually explain it to me in my own words. And yes, I didn't know so many things about data, but I already had a bachelor degree in business management and accounting. So I do know math, I do know of statistics, but I wasn't really that strong in those two fields. So I would have appreciated if someone would explain it to me in a nice language. What happened is, I'm gonna exactly tell you what was going on inside my head. Every time someone would say something that I don't understand, I would feel first confused and then frustrated. And then I'd feel so bad about myself, like, why am I so stupid? Why am I not getting what they're saying? There's something wrong with me. But I Googled, again, I like Google a lot. So again, I found myself not alone in this. So many people have been struggling with this as well. And I also Googled again the correlation between not understanding and the frustration and the feeling of failure and all of those things. They are actually connected in a very, very strong way, in a way that you can never imagine. And somehow, from the readings, I found out that psychologically, when you don't understand something or when you feel that you're not smart enough, you start feeling frustrated. And when you're frustrated, you start feeling that you are a failure. And surprisingly, failure is exactly very, very similar to fear, because they both trigger the same responses. And I'm sure you're all familiar with the responses of fear, which is fight or flight or freeze. Okay? So failure makes people do the same things. Now, there was another article also on Google. Someone very, very funny interpreted all those responses in the work environment. And what he found is that people do apply those three responses in the work environment. So you have people who fight, you have people who flight, and you have others who freeze. And he characterized them with those three creatures. So if a colleague or a stakeholder that you have explained something and they didn't understand, they will turn into either a Godzilla. And a Godzilla at work is someone who keeps attacking you for no reason. You keep explaining something and the person goes back and pick up on your ideas. It's their defensive way of dealing with the fact that they don't understand what you're saying and they feel very bad about themselves. So that's the Godzilla response. The other type of response is the hummingbird. The hummingbird, that I would just make it short for you. The hummingbird, I was always the hummingbird in those situations, because every time I wouldn't understand something, I would distract myself with other things. I would say things like, okay, that's too complicated to understand right now. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do this end of the day or end of the week or end of the month. And because right now I have this email to send, I have that meeting to set up, and I have to go to the supermarket, and I have to call my mom, and I have to do... So the point is, I keep distracting myself with so many things except that complicated things that I couldn't understand. And that's the hummingbird response. The third response is the freezing deer. You know, deers, when they see a car on the road, they just freeze and they don't do anything. Those are decision makers who get overwhelmed with information that you have communicated, and they can't make a decision, so they just don't do anything. Bottom line, those three responses lead to one thing. They lead to rejecting your project, or your budget is not approved as quickly as you wanted, or the new data scientists that you were waiting for to be hired are not hired yet, and you don't want that. Yeah? So in order to avoid all of this, We don't want any Godzillas or hummingbirds or freezing deers in the meeting room. So this is why it's very important for us to learn how these people understand and how they can absorb information, so we can adapt our communication style to them and help them to make better decisions and help ourselves to succeed as well. So, going back to the learning styles, and I'm not going to make that very long, I have chosen the three top or most common learning styles that you would identify really quickly. So, I'm not talking about someone you've just met. I'm talking about a stakeholder or a decision maker that you meet constantly and you interact with a lot, and you are aware of their style or their terminology most of the time. So, the three learning styles are the visual, and the auditory, and the kinesthetic. The visual person is someone who likes to see the information. These are the people who like to see how the algorithm works, or what is happening behind the scene, or how the integration between the data source and the platform that you're using is connected. So how would you know them? They use specific words that are always related or linked to the vision. So these people would always say things like, let's see how this will go, or how do you view this, or let's have an overview of something, or I can't picture how this is fitting into our strategy. So it's always something related to the eyes. That's the visual person. And the way you adapt your communication style to them is that you need to provide like flip charts in the room. You need to draw how the algorithm is working, or how the flow is going to be happening. You need to like sketch your ideas. And you need to also like show them like videos, like suggest a YouTube video for them to watch to explain something very complex, or even record a training session and send it to them. That's a visual person. An auditory person is someone who likes to hear the stories. These are the people who listen to podcasts. These are the people who will use sentences like the ones that you see on the screen. It's let's talk over this, or tell me, or let's discuss even more, or can you elaborate? So it's always about you talking or them asking questions. The way you interact with a person like this is that, and you will always find those people normally saying things like, so if I summarize what you said, does that mean 1, 2, 3, 4? So this is how they make sure that they observe the information that you have been communicating, and this is how they make sure that they have understood very well, because later on they will retrieve those information. You also need to ask them questions. Maybe record the session or the training that you have conducted and then send it to them again. The kinesthetic person is someone who likes to do things. So it's not always possible in the data world, because if you're like running a workshop, they can just do artwork with their hands. But when it comes to data world, what they can do is that they can do hands-on sessions. So you can allow them for like a free training environment, or show them a demo, or give them an idea to just, to try it themselves. These are the people who will always ask you, so how do you feel about this idea? So the words like feel, the words like what is your intuition? Or something like, let's try it with like actual data or an actual project. And with these people, if you can't, or if the field is not allowing you to provide them with a hands-on session, what's possible to do is to engage them in physical activity. So the idea of having a workshop, them writing notes, or asking them to write their ideas on a post-it and hang it on the wall, things that will include them being active and involved something like that. Also, role play is very intuitive for them as well. So this is basically psychology and learning style. Maybe we can see how we can communicate something like deep learning with a stakeholder. Stakeholder who is coming from a business background, who doesn't know what neural network is, deep learning, and doesn't know or understand how is this related to them and their projects and their ideas. Or why should they approve a budget for extra machine with memory, or another data scientist to be hired, and so on and so forth. And let's say, for example, that this person decided to just ask you this question. So what exactly is deep learning? And I've been asked that question before. So I'm going to give you an example that will cover two of those learning styles and how to communicate something like that with them. If you start with words like this, recurrent, convolutional, epoch, backpropagation, hidden layers, like rejection ahead. Your project is possibly going to be delayed because those are like mystery for them. You have spent days and nights reading or watching tutorials in Python and R to understand how neural network is working and how deep learning is working, but this person doesn't know any of that, and they need a better explanation, something that will relate to them and something that will make sense for them. Show something like this, still rejection, nothing will happen. The way you do it is basically you need to break it down for them, because from different meetings that I have attended, not so many people outside this field understand the difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning and deep learning. There's a lot of confusion and overlapping for all those terminologies. So maybe something like this can let them understand the relationship between both and the fact that they are related in a way that this is a subfield of this and this. So maybe you can explain what computer science is in nice words, and then maybe you can go to the fact that artificial intelligence is a subfield of computer science, and in a way it requires some human interaction. And then what I would suggest is spend a little bit of time on the machine learning part and what does it mean, and the fact that it's about learning from the past and learning from the patterns in the data. And you can only achieve this by allowing the machine to learn without explicitly program it to deal with the data. And then from there, from explaining what machine learning is in business language, you can just go ahead to deep learning and explain what deep learning is and the fact that it's part of machine learning. Okay? So let's say someone decided to really understand, okay, so how does it work? Like, you keep saying that it works with image classification or NLP. Like, what exactly is happening? Why is it called deep learning? Why is it called neural network? What is this? So maybe what I did is just to prove to you that there are so many resources on Google as well, that will help you to find a very nice way to explain very complex concepts like these to business stakeholders, or anyone who wants to understand what that is. So I found this very nice video. I added the link for it. It's a very, very simple explanation, a very nice and intuitive way to explain what neural network is, and of course what deep learning is after that. And all I did was literally take screenshots from that explanation, just to prove to you that walking the extra mile is not gonna take more than, I don't know, 15 minutes of your time, basically. But it will save you a lot of convincing and a lot of communication with your stakeholder, and will provide you with successful results after that. So here's an example. You can explain it in this way. Like, let's say that you want to predict Y based on the inputs X. For example, and in the video, he's giving that example of the number of hours of sleep and the number of hours of study versus the scores of the exam. And he goes on explaining the fact that we have data, which means we have the past of all those scores and those sleeping hours and studying hours. And if we have this data, we can predict the final score of the final exam. And he's basically explaining the fact that because of this problem, we're trying to predict a score. We call it supervised regression. Supervised because we have input and output. We know them both. So that means supervised. And it's regression because we're trying to predict a number. But if we're trying to predict a grade, like A or B or C, that means it's a classification. And he goes from there explaining that there are various classification algorithms. One of them is the neural network. And now he goes explaining what is the neural network. And the explanation is very simple, that it's inspired by how the brain is working, how the brain cells are communicating with each other, and the fact that they have neurons transmitting, transmitting signals, that carries information, okay? And then now we can build this neural network after we got this, this understanding. And the fact that we have two inputs, that means the hours of sleep and the hours of study, that means we have two items for the input layer. And the final thing is an output, just one, because it's the score. And you add a layer to do the calculations in order to help you to predict, and that's what we call hidden layer. The more layers that you add, the more you complicate and advance the algorithm, and this is where you call it deep learning. Now, we know that it's more than that. We know that there are things like the activation functions and the synapses and the nodes and I don't know, the epochs and the batch size. We all know this, but we know this because we've studied that and we've applying this at work, and we have spent hours and days to understand it, but our stakeholders doesn't need to know all of this. He needs to know something that, or she needs to know something that is relevant for them to understand what they're trying to approve or what they're trying to facilitate to make the project work. And other than that, you can find so many nice visualizations that will help the person to understand after the overview or the high-level explanation for things. You can help them find things like that. I'm sorry it's not available here because it's PDF, but this is GIF. You can literally search for neural network GIFs, and you will find so many intuitive ones just like that. This style is basically very useful for someone who is visual and someone who is auditory, because I have provided visual ed or help for the person to picture what is happening or how the algorithm is working. And I've also spoken and told the story behind what is happening on the screen. So this is helping those two learning styles. Someone who is kinesthetic, we can show them. So maybe we can, if we click on this link, I can't read Swedish. Which one is open? This one? Yeah. Okay. So this is what I would do with someone who is kinesthetic, someone who likes to try things. I show them a demo. I show them how deep learning is working in a platform, for example, which is basically, this is our platform. So this is like a visual representation for a flow of image classification project that we have conducted using deep learning. And the idea is to show the person and allow them to actually explore what is going on and what is happening. So what are these folders and what they're containing. And you can explain to them and you can ask them to just click ahead and go and see the fact that you have here a bunch of images for lions and tigers. And the idea is that you are applying a deep learning algorithm to classify the unknown ones. So these are images that had labels on them. We used them to train the model. And eventually, we scored the new data using that model. So we got the label, and we can show them the accuracy. So this is some sort of a semi-hands-on session for someone who is kinesthetic and wants to try things with their hands. Other than that, of course, don't forget to make it relevant for them. So the idea is after that, you have to find a way to communicate how is this relevant to their business case that they are handling. So if it's a banker, you can tell them that image classification can help you to identify signatures or identify fraud versus not fraud in handwritings. And if it's someone who works for security or police forces, you can tell them that it will help for the image recognition and class and face recognition things. So the idea is just to find a way to be relevant to the person. I hope this helps, and I hope it's not like a boring presentation. I made it deliberately not technical because I believe that it's very important to be aware of how we're communicating our good work. We are data scientists. We work a lot. We work hard, but sometimes communicating what you're doing might just not be as amazing as your work. So if you just learn those tricks and communicate with your business stakeholders, I'm sure you'll find it good. So thank you.